Brother Joe came to me and he said, "So 3 to 5 minutes, right?" And I said to him, "My grandpa could hear you." He would say, 94 years, 3 minutes, that's all I get? Brother Joe looked at me and he said, "You're right, son, take your time." So let's cut to the chase. Grandpa was a very old man. At the age of 94, a man becomes a lot of things to a lot of people. He was a son, he was a brother to Emil and to Fink. He was a father to 6 awesome adults. Well, 5, and Mike. He was a grandfather to 21 of us, and a great-grandfather to 23. He was a friend and mentor to hundreds. He was also a soldier, a philanthropist. He was many things to many people. But to me, he was Goomba. I'm number 11 of 21 in the grandkids, and I was always very close with Grandpa. I was named after him. My middle name is Alan, and I've looked up to him from the day I can remember. My wife Sarah and I, when we had our first son, and it came to the naming discussion, it was really a no-brainer. Jack, say hello. Our 11-year-old Jack, named after my grandfather. I'm really going to miss Gramps. It's going to be odd when April rolls around and I don't have the annual birthday call from G&G. I'm going to miss our regular calls, which always included very sound advice and lots of reassurance and affirmation. I'll miss walks around the lake out here with Grandpa, where we'd usually talk about Notre Dame football, which was always filled with hope and promise this time of year, and quickly fades to disgust and disappointment. And while it's obviously hard to say goodbye to someone you love, it's also great to be able to honor Grandpa today. He taught me so much in my life. As I was preparing for today, I had the good fortune of having an abundance of reference material. Stories for many of you that had been shared either verbally or passed along via email to me were just overwhelming to see how much Grandpa meant to so many people. But I had my own reference material as well. I had saved every letter Grandpa had written me over the past 20 years. And so I spent the past 2 days reading about 200 letters, rereading 200 letters over the past 20 years. And so I decided the best way to honor Grandpa today would be to share with all of you what I learned from him. Now, Grandpa wouldn't want this to be a dull, boring eulogy, so I decided to do it in a top 10 format, David Letterman style. So, without further ado, the top 10 things that Grandpa taught me. Number 10, play the course as you find it. Anyone who knew Grandpa heard this from him. One shot at a time. Obviously, this is a metaphor for life that he used, suggesting to take it one day at a time. He would say the sun comes up every morning. His advice was always so good due to his logical, calm, and composed approach to problem solving. And I think that was passed on to many Bergeses. Do your best, he would say. That's all it is. That's all we ask, is that you do your best. And if you do your best, we're going to be proud of you. Give it your best shot. He taught me how to do my best. Number 9 on the top 10 list of things that Grandpa taught me is social responsibility. Do good, Charlie, he would say. He called everyone Charlie. It's really weird, and I have no idea why. Just as a side note, he did finally have a great-grandchild named Charlie, number 23. So when he finally got it right, he now passes. I remember Grandpa telling me a story about a tombstone that he saw one time in Morrison. And the tombstone read, "He cared." That's all it said. Since the day he saw that, Grandpa aspired to be remembered in a similar way. And Grandpa cared all right. From his young adult years serving in the U.S. Army to his constant involvement in the community, Grandpa was extraordinarily generous, sharing his home, his money, and his wisdom liberally. I was just one of hundreds to be mentored by Grandpa. Several years ago, I asked Grandpa to write me a list of his most important values. He titled this, "The Tenets of John Allen Burgess," and I'll have copies available at the tailgate. Card, so if you're interested in taking one, come find me. So among his tenets were have compassion for all less fortunate, help where you can, anyone with needs. Grandpa taught me how to do good. Number 8 on the top 10 list of things that Grandpa taught me is how to have fun. He was the master of inventing games out of nothing. Games such as Peterkins, Bunny in the Hole, War, the game of Monster Chase he would play with Ann's kids. And whether it was singing Christmas carols under the tree, Trot Trot to Boston, Hit the Bat, or family football games, Grandpa knew how to have fun, and he knew how to get everyone involved in the fun. When I was in high school, my brother Matt was a year ahead of me, and he pulled off a senior prank that involved chickens in the lockers on the chicken nugget day at lunch. Refusing to be outdone, the ringleader, who was 1 year behind him, refused to be outdone and enlisted Grandpa as a strategic advisor. His counsel proved to be invaluable. Grandpa taught me very important facts like cows can only go upstairs and not downstairs. Needless to say, Grandpa's counsel was priceless. And Matt was out. He taught me how to have fun. Number 7 on the list of the top 10 things that Grandpa taught me was how to live a life of faith. Grandpa believed in God, and he was a faithful servant in all parts of his life. He felt that church teaching should not just apply to home, but they should also apply to the workplace. An example of this is Grandpa living by the golden rule. Treat others as you wish to be treated. In his GE days of manufacturing, there's a story about an office sign, a sign that was posted outside of the office that read, "Factory workers must clean shoes before entering." Grandpa thought this would make factory employees feel like second-class citizens, so he ripped the sign down and went after the guy who put it up. One of my favorite Grandpa sayings is, if you ever want to make God laugh, just tell him you have a plan. Grandpa taught me how to live a life of faith. Number 6 on the list of top 10 things my grandfather taught me is how to drive. At an age that was far below the legal limit, Grandpa gave me my first experience driving a car. And where did he direct me to drive? To the golf course, where he took me to the driving range and taught me how to drive a golf ball. It's a 2-for-1 deal for those of you keeping score at home. Number 5 on the list of the top 10 things my grandfather taught me is the importance of ethics. This was Grandpa's hallmark. He operated with the highest level of integrity at all times, emphasizing to others that once this was lost, it could never, ever be regained. On that list of values he gave me, the tenets of John Allen Burges years ago, the number 1 thing on that list was be honest and ethical in all things. The Burgess Lecture Series in business ethics was introduced at Notre Dame several years back as a way to honor this trait of Grandpa's. Tolerance was another characteristic that I would put into this bucket of ethics that he taught us. He had a colleague by the name of Fred Allen, who was an African American. He told me this story about a time in Illinois when he was taking Fred out for a golf outing. And there were some concerns that were brought to his attention around racism, the potential of racism at the golf course. Well, Grandpa let it be known that if anyone made a single remark about the color of this man's skin, that he would buy the course for plant expansion and put a dump on it. He taught me how to do what's right. Number 4 on the list of the top 10 things that Grandpa taught me was how to lead. I'm told that when Grandpa retired, hundreds of people came out to pay him tributes. He was the ultimate people leader. Decades after retirement, he still maintained contact and friendships with many of the people that he worked with. And it's incredible to hear these tributes and to see these relationships flourishing after all these years. A few of my favorites that I've heard over this past week. One gentleman said Grandpa knew everyone's name in the plant and often knew their children's names, their families' names. He always sought out ideas and opinions of others and humbly recognized the importance of this. He would say, when you think you have all the answers, people will stop asking you questions. Another one of his sayings was, I'm not telling you what to do, I'm telling you what needs to be done. A true sense of empowerment in his leadership style. Grandpa also led with courage, which meant taking an unpopular stance at times. My favorite story here is one which Grandpa told often. It was about the iconic business legend, Jack Welch, in a time when they went toe-to-toe, and they both adamantly disagreed with each other in a meeting. And Jack Welch said to Grandpa, I'm right, Jack, I know I'm right on this. And Grandpa Jack's response was, Welch, even a broken clock is right twice a day. That's courage. Grandpa taught me how to lead. Number 3 on the list of the top 10 things my grandfather taught me is how not to run. For those of you that have not had the displeasure of seeing a Berges attempt to run, there's a good reason for this. We cannot. I've been cursed with what's known as the Berges slows, which is a direct result of Grandpa's DNA that prohibits my left leg and right leg from moving in a synchronized and rapid fashion. So thank you, Grandpa, for teaching me how not to run. Number 2 on my list of top 10 things that Grandpa taught me is how to be a husband. At 71 years of marriage, Grandpa knew a thing or two about this. What is even more impressive is how madly in love Grandpa remained for all those years. Ann told me a story about when Grandma was unable to prepare food like she used to, that Grandpa made a miserable attempt at making food and preparing the meals. And one of the things he did for Grandma was cut the edges of the tomatoes because she didn't like them getting stuck in her teeth. All of his letters to me ended with some words of wisdom, usually about love. And a few of my favorites include, laugh often, love forever, and let your example of love be seen by the world. Grandpa was very affectionate. He and Grandma said, I love you to each other several times a day to each other, and every single night of their lives before they went to bed. When G&G became less mobile, Grandpa was upset with his children that they were unable to find a double chair for them to sit in so they could hold hands together all day. Grandpa taught me how to love. The number one thing on the list of things that Grandpa taught me on my top 10 list is what it means to be a Burgess. As the patriarch of our family, Grandpa taught us that Burgesses stick together, always and at all costs. The family deserves unconditional love. He taught us to lead with purpose, to do our best, to do what's right, and to make a contribution to society. Growing up, Grandma and Grandpa would always leave little notes hidden around the house after they visited. And these little notes would read, DFY, G&G, or don't forget your grandparents. In return, we would leave notes when we visited G&G, hide them all over their house after visits. And this exchange continued for decades. In fact, my children still do this when we visit. Well, Gramps, it looks like I got the last word, because I left a don't forget your grandkids note in the casket. John Allen Burgess had a profound impact on a lot of people. To me, he was not just my grandfather, he was my hero. It's fitting, the readings today, which I was not aware of, because towards the end of his life, I recall a conversation I had with Grandpa about the inevitable end. And he quoted St. Paul saying, I fought a good fight. That you did, Gramps. And we will not forget our grandfather. Ever. May you rest in peace.